And any salesperson who does not leverage LinkedIn to build their online reputation is putting themselves at a massive disadvantage to the rest of the salespeople in their ecosystem. And once you get disconnected from someone, they're never going to connect with you again. They're going to remember visibility creates opportunity. And that became my mantra. And it has been ever since that day.
Maybe you're giving advice and everything. And then when, like you said, when you have an offer, they're coming to you because they value that because you look like an expert or a trusted authority. All right, so wherever you're at today, whether you're driving down the road and you're about to meet with the prospect, or let's say you're about to pick up your phone and you're about to call a potential customer, or maybe you're walking into a boardroom meeting right now to finalize a deal. In our day and age right now with the pandemic, maybe you're doing that through Zoom. I don't know where you're at, but here's my question that I want you to ask yourself. What does it actually take for you listening to me right now to be a top 1% salesperson in your industry, okay? The salesperson who makes all the money, the salesperson who gets any promotion they want, they even turn down promotions they don't want. They have all the respect from ownership and management in their company. The salesperson who leads by example because they outsell everyone else. Well, my next guest is gonna help answer that question for you with a little spin that we're going to talk about. So let me give you a small taste of this gentleman's background. He is an elite salesperson, as he says, this turned marketing visionary. He believes that real success comes from adding value in excess of whatever you ask for in return. And that operating principle has led to some amazing projects over the years with extraordinary companies like LinkedIn, Hootsuite, and Slack. I love Slack, actually. With 10 plus years of sales experience and a passion for social media, he's become a leading authority on social selling. We're going to talk a lot about that today, and a topic that he promotes through global speaking engagements and customer trainings. Now, early in his career, he learned how to leverage social media into an inbound engine for companies to drive revenue. And over the past 20 years, this has manifested into a global audience of professionals that have learned not just the why, but the how, that's important, of using content and social media for their companies to scale them. Let me welcome to the show, Mr. Koka Sexton. Koka, very unique name. Where did that come from?
Oh, you'd need a whole nother podcast to hear that story. Background, my mom's side of the family is Russian. They immigrated here back in I think the 50s. And Koka is short for Constantine. That's where the story comes into play, but Constantine is a family name.
Hey, that's awesome, man. So, hey, here's the thing. I love having experts on the show where we talk about human behavior and how that relates to even social selling, obviously, sales, marketing, and to be a top performer. So let's do this. I want to dive right into your story, and let's give our listeners maybe a feel for your background and how you arrived at this point where you're one of the elite authorities on social selling, on marketing, on persuasion. Maybe tell us a little bit about your background and how this started for you. Like, where did you learn all these skills?
Yeah, so, I wish I could say I went to a specific university and figured all this out, but that's not the case.
Sure.
I'm very nerdy at heart. I'm a geek by nature.
Yeah.
And when I first started my career, my professional career, I had zero skills. I had no idea what I was doing. And when I got my very first sales job, what I realized was that I was swimming in a very big pond and I was a very small fish.
Okay.
So how was I going to figure that out? And back then, let's say, what was it, 20 years ago? I'm going to date myself here. My sales manager, how we were measured, as a lot of salespeople, as I realized, still are measured, is just number of dials and talk time.
Sure.
So they have to make 100 dials a day and they have to have a certain number of talk time. And that's the only measurement of success that I had as a salesperson outside of my revenue.
Right.
The problem with that is that I could be cold calling all day long and get nowhere, right? Like this is the difference of the issue
like
that we have as salespeople.
Waste of time. Nobody even answers the phone.
Exactly. But we all need to know that needs to happen. So what I learned how to do, being this nerd, was how do I leverage social media? I saw what marketing was doing. Yeah. And I saw how marketing was building an audience around the company and how marketing was sending out messages and how they were driving what they back then was called inbound, or I don't even know if it was called inbound at that point. It was just, they were generating leads.
Sure.
And I thought to myself, if I could do this as a salesperson, I could be really successful.
Okay.
And I had to find the best ways to do that. And as a salesperson, a young salesperson, I did not have a budget. I didn't have money. I was basically living off of like whatever small commission check I was getting at the time. And so I started using social media because the barrier of entry there was zero.
Yeah.
And I started seeing how other people in different industries, not sales, more in the entertainment space, were starting to use social media to build an awareness. And they were starting to actually become like from, rags to riches stories.
To build like a brand. So to build a brand. So how did you go from there? Like using social media, because everybody uses social media in our day and age, almost everybody. I mean, 20 years ago, obviously not so much, but how did you go from that point to becoming a leading authority on social selling? Because that's a big jump. Not many people can do that for sure.
And it was a fast rise. And it was because I became super invested on how to make this successful. 99.9% of social media experts talk about the fluff. They talk about the great stuff that you can get out of it and how to be shiny and how to like build the audience. I focused on how do you turn that audience into revenue and where are the touch points of that activity and how do you integrate that activity into your CRM and into the other activities that you're having so you can measure that effort. And as soon as you could measure that effort, it became a no-brainer. And everyone I showed it to said, let's figure out how to do this on a larger scale.
So how do you monetize it? Not just how do you do it, but how do you monetize?
Because that's the whole goal of sales. If everything you're doing should be playing the game of how to increase my paycheck, short-term, long-term, whatever that may be. And the idea of social selling is the long-term game because it'll not just help you out in the career you have today, it's going to help you out in the career you have in the next 15 years because that audience will follow you. And that I'm a prime example of that.
Now I looked this up. You were actually in the US Army a while ago. How did that experience impact you in your current work?
Well, in more ways than I can probably count. I think, the military was probably the best experience I had. It literally taught me that anything is possible. My mental barriers are the only thing that holds me back in life.
Sure.
That in mind, how that dramatically shifted my career to where I'm at today was when I was deployed in Iraq back in 2003, 2004.
Sure.
I was writing letters home, like a blog. And I realized that a blog somehow turned me into this, hometown celebrity because news outlets and stuff started seeing this. And I thought to myself, holy shit, visibility creates opportunity. And that became my mantra. And it has been ever since that day. Visibility creates opportunity. And if you, as a professional, build your visibility, you will always be chased by opportunity if you build the visibility correctly. And then there's a methodology around that.
No, 100%. You're exactly right. Like 2 years ago, and we're still building our list and everything, but we have close to 200,000 salespeople on our list. But it was in about a 16-month period, I really got big on Facebook, right? So we spent about $100,000 a month in ads. Now I know a lot of people can't be like, oh, I don't have $100,000 a month to spend on ads, but you can get visible very, very quickly, even organically, like you're talking about. But once you get visible, you kind of get on the map, right?
Yep. And that's when it really comes into play. And what you have to do is start realizing that there's other components. So yes, you've built the bonfire. People want to come see it. And this is kind of going back to the bio, the next kind of operating philosophy is add value in excess.
Yeah.
I want to add value in as many ways as possible around my industry, my own belief systems, whatever that is, to help the community with the idea of when I have an offer, when I have something to ask for, it's going to be a no-brainer.
Because once you add that value in your mind, in their mind, you're perceived as an expert in that subject field, or what we call a trusted authority, right? So you're giving value, you're giving, maybe you're giving advice and everything. And then when, like you said, when you have an offer, they're coming to you because they value that because you look like an expert or a trusted authority.
The best case scenario with any sales engagement is you're selling a product for $10,000 and your customer sees $1 million in value.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Now, how can you add $1 million in value to your community, to your following, before you ask for that deal, before you ask for that sales call? Right? Many of my deals that I've learned over the years have happened because these have been sales leaders that have followed me for the past 4, 5, 6 years. And I never actually reached out to them and said, hey, let me train your sales team.
Sure.
Right? So when their company finally matured and they said, hey, we need to figure out how to get our sales team online more, especially the pandemic shifted all of this for a lot of companies.
Of course,
And they started relying more on the salespeople's individual efforts online because
Yeah.
people weren't even answering their phones. They said, who do we call? Well, all these sales leaders said, I know the guy.
Yeah.
And in fact, I know the exact methodology because now I understand it because I now am coming to him because he's added so much value.
That makes
And now
sense.
he's going to be able to ask whatever he wants because he sees the value that we need.
Now, with the pandemic, like what parts of marketing, social selling are you focusing on the most right now?
I mean, it's all aspects. So, I believe visibility creates opportunity. Content is the fuel, and that's where a lot of marketing comes into play. Sure. Relationships matter. That's the salespeople side, and then taking it online to offline. So the marketing side of it is really how is marketing aligned with sales, creating the assets needed to produce the visibility in their audiences to drive that inbound.
Okay.
So there's a lot of coordination right now with online events, the webinars, individual things like that. As well as white papers and pieces that actually get downloads.
What type of companies are you working? Like, what type of companies engage you? And here's my second question to that. What's really the number one reason why they engage you? Like specifically, because there's a lot of companies that teach social selling, right? So what type of companies are you working with? And what's the number one reason why they come to you over someone else?
Yeah, so it's all types of sizes. I mean, I have companies that are 15 employees, and it's a lot of like coaching the senior, like the founder and like a couple of people there, like just how to build their brand because they're trying to launch their product, and they realize that telling the entrepreneurial journey is actually a very powerful story to have. Sure. So there's that side of it, and then there's very large companies that have hundreds of sales people. Yeah. And the goal with them is train my salespeople how to be polished on LinkedIn specifically as the social tool, and how do they build this audience.
How do you train them to be polished on LinkedIn?
Well, it comes down to a few different factors. So one is, what does their profile look like? There's you have to take a really deep look at your profile and make sure that it's customer facing. Most salespeople talk about me, when the reality is your customers do not give a crap about you. They want to look at your profile and they want to know, how are you going to help me? Yeah. And if it sounds like you're selfish, they're going to move away from it. So how do you make it?
So you need to make your LinkedIn profile more problem centric, how you solve problems. So when a prospect lands on it, they're like, oh, wow, I have those problems, right? Whereas most salespeople or people probably make it more about product centric, where they're talking about their solution. You're talking about focused on the customer and and really their problems.
And this, I'm going to drop a name here. Dan Swift, he was a colleague of mine when I worked at LinkedIn. He coined the term resume to reputation, and I've just kind of run with it over the years. Yeah. And most people think of their LinkedIn profile as their online resume. Yeah. And for people that are looking for a job, fine. Like that's what it's there for. But the reality is that the platform has evolved so much and people haven't kept up to it. It is now your online reputation. And any salesperson who does not leverage LinkedIn to build their online reputation is putting themselves at a massive disadvantage to the rest of the salespeople in their ecosystem.
Yeah. So let's go through this again. So when the company engages you, you come on board with them. What's one of the first couple of things that you really have to dive in and help them really, really fix to get to a higher level of sales?
Yeah, so most of it's just an assessment. It's getting an idea. There's a quick questionnaire that I throw out to understand a little bit about their background, their ideology behind this, and there's a kind of their interest level.
Sure.
Then there's a look at their social kind of profiles. So LinkedIn has a thing called a social selling index. It's free. Anybody can get the number. Yeah. And I take that number, and basically they throw that number at me because I was around LinkedIn when we created the SSI. I understand it. I'm sure lots of things have changed within it, but just by knowing the number, I know almost immediately what they need to fix. Okay. And so from a sales team standpoint, I can generalize the content that they need. And then from an individual coaching standpoint, I can tell individual reps what they need to do and the methodology that they need to apply into it.
I see. Well, in your mind, and I want to dig into this a little bit deeper, and I apologize for the probing questions I'm asking you, but what are basically the top three things that you see most companies do wrong when it comes to social selling? So the top three things that they're doing wrong when it comes to social selling, and then how do they change that? That's the most important part. Not just what they're doing wrong, but what do they do to fix those three things?
So top three things. Number one is that they don't let their sales team on LinkedIn. And I'm still finding companies that think that there's no value in leveraging these social platforms. So that's the first.
Why is that? Why do they feel there's no value in leveraging social media platforms? What's the root cause?
Well, one, their customer's not there. There's a fear of competition. I think that's a big one, depending on the industry. Not as much as in tech, but when I talk to companies outside of that, like medical devices, things along those lines, there's a big fear. Oh, fintech was another big one. Is a really big area of they're just afraid that the competitors are going to see what they're doing, and it's going to become an issue.
Right.
And it always comes around this whole fear factor. I think that's one of the biggest issues. Either they're not going to have control of what the salespeople are saying, and if that's the case, then you should be hiring new salespeople. I have rebuttals for all of this because I've faced this numerous times over my career. It just is crazy to me that I still run into these rebuttals when I talk to companies. Okay. And I'd say the third one is that they're not empowering their sales team. So either one, they're actively fighting it. Two, they are not really engaging with it, and three, they're not empowering the reps. And when they realize that their employees are using social media and that their customers are on social media, they should be finding ways, especially from a sales standpoint, empowering those reps to be as visible as possible, because again, visibility creates opportunity.
So let me get this. I wrote these down. So number one is not leveraging LinkedIn for salespeople. That's the number one thing most companies are doing wrong. What was number two?
Number two is, even though they know it's happening, they're not doing anything about it. Like they're passive. It's extremely of a neutral standpoint, which is where I think a lot of companies are now. They're just like, oh yeah, the salespeople, they use LinkedIn, whatever. That's not their job. Their job is to make $100 a day and be on 2 hours of talk time.
Okay.
They're being held to different metrics.
Okay.
And then the third side of it would be they're not empowering them. So then they realize and they say it's happening, but they're giving them robotic text to be sending out there. We want to do social selling. So here's a list of 7 things you should share today from the company. And it's like, that's not really.
So it's not personalized. So when you come in, let's just go through these things. So how do you change them not leveraging LinkedIn for salespeople? Like, what are a few things you come in and do to really help these companies, not just realize it, but here's a game plan, here's exactly what to do?
I mean, it's all data driven. And that, again, the great benefit of working at LinkedIn was the insights that I had about just being data driven and decision making.
Yeah.
And you show them data. So what industry are you in? What kind of people are you targeting? VPs, directors? Let's go in LinkedIn right now because it's free to search it. I'll tell you how many people are on the platform that fit your ideal customer profile. And then I can probably tell you how many of them are actually active on the platform. And if that number is big enough that you care about it, then your salespeople should probably be in that pool swimming and getting to know these people.
Okay. I like that.
Right?
So that's the number one thing. And then number three, let's even talk about the third thing, not empowering their salespeople. How do you go in and change that culture for their company to be able to actually do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think once a company realizes that there's gold to mine on these platforms, that they have to actually put the energy and effort in place, and sometimes it's financial, of creating the content necessary for the salespeople to be active enough. Okay. And this isn't product specific. So this is where I start the conversation with marketing about what's the difference between content and collateral. Stop giving your sales teams collateral to share. Okay. Nobody cares about the data sheet. That's so bottom of the funnel. Right. Start producing all the content that's top of the funnel. Okay. What questions are all these people asking just in general? Okay. And this is where a lot of companies are where their blogs come into play and podcasting and this other stuff. It's the very top of the funnel. This is the stuff that salespeople want to share. Yeah. Because I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just adding value. I'm giving you, it might be a blog post from my own company blog, but the article itself is literally around making you successful. It's not about me asking for anything in return.
Yeah. So you're giving them an hors d'oeuvre of what could be if they actually engage and want to learn more, right? By getting involved with what you're doing. You're giving little hors d'oeuvres that lead to the main course, basically.
The main course. And then, the dessert on that side of it is that you're going to find some reps that work at your company that love this, that feed off of it. They're going to be like Kokas. They're going to be like, I want to be all over. I want to be on the podcast. I want to be speaking on things. I want to create my own podcast.
Yeah.
And a great company is going to look at that person and see the value behind that and say, let's feed that beast. Yeah. Let's turn this individual into their own little brand around our company. And you're seeing companies like Gong. I mean, the tech space is really figuring this out. Yeah. And we're starting to see it in other industries. But the reality is that if you look at your industry, look at your ecosystem, and if there's not one or a dozen, let's call it even 12, shining stars that are examples of sales leadership in your space, being vocal on platforms, there's a huge vacuum to fill. And why not you?
Hey, let's talk about individual salespeople branding themselves real quick. What would be the biggest piece of advice that you would give just a salesperson working for a company that's listening to this right now about how to build their brand on social media and use that to be able to sell more of their product service? Let's say the company does not even engage you, doesn't know anything about you, but what's the biggest piece of advice for just a regular salesperson who works for a company about how they can brand themselves on social media and use that to sell more of their products and services?
Yeah, and I'm going to sound like a broken record here. The answer is visibility creates opportunity.
Sure.
The problem is that most salespeople have a fear of rejection, insecurity of putting themselves out there and looking bad. It's all based on head trash, and salespeople are probably the best examples of people who can get rid of that, because we can deal with getting rejected 100 times a day and still pick up the phone the next day,
Sure.
right? So we have to get over that head trash. Put yourself out there, have an opinion, talk about your industry, add the value, read about your space. One of the things I tell every new salesperson is you should become a fanatic about your industry and not just your product.
Yeah.
Understand why this matters, because when you become convinced that what you are selling solves the problem, that conviction comes out in your voice, it comes out in your attitude, and then all you're doing is amplifying that through social, right? Like you're finding other things to talk about.
You're starting to view yourself what we call as more of a problem finder and a problem solver rather than a product pusher, which is what most salespeople do, right? So in our day, you should never be
pushing your product.
Yeah, 100%, especially in social selling when you're first starting, right? So you have to view yourself as more of a problem finder. And that's basically you're asking questions to your prospects, whether it's through social media or one-on-one or whatever, that's causing them to think about problems they might not have even thought they had, right? Because most prospects, let's be real, when you first talk to them, don't even know they have a problem. Or maybe they know they have a problem, but they don't realize how bad the problem really is. Or maybe they know they have a problem, it's bad, but they don't understand the consequences if they don't do anything about it now. And even on social selling, if you start to view yourself as more of that problem finder and you're asking questions that get that prospect to think of problems that they didn't even think they had, they start to view you, like you said, as more of an expert or a trusted authority that they can go to when they can actually turn to actually solve those problems. And then you become a problem solver because they purchase from you, you can solve their problems. Now, most salespeople are what we call product pushers, right? So they get on social media, or even if they're one-on-one, and they bring up their solution very early in the conversation. So they start talking about the features and the benefits, and we have the best this and the best that, and we got the best customer service, and here's our corporate office, and our owners have the best integrity, and blah, 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 right? And so the prospect starts to view them as more of a salesperson who's trying to stuff their solution down their throat, whereas they become more of a product pusher and they become commoditized based on price. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree 100%. I think, the biggest problem, especially in the social space, is that salespeople get too eager, that I don't connect. I have this whole talk record on what a connection philosophy is. And I stay true to it myself. And when I connect with somebody and the first response I get from them is a pitch, I immediately get rid of them, because I don't even know you yet. And I don't even really, and it's very clear that you don't know me, because you would know that that's not how you do this. And I think that's a very big issue that salespeople are going to face. And once you get disconnected from someone, they're never going to connect with you again. They're going to remember. There's a log, right? So, you're playing the long game. There are going to be people who raise their hand and say, I want to talk to you about your product. And then, fine, go into all your stuff. 90% of the audience out there just wants to hear about the problem that you're seeing. Be data-driven. Talk about the industry. Talk about the issues that are being found, the problems you're finding, the data around that, and how you can help solve them, but don't ever actually try and pitch it to somebody. Just talk about how you're adding value in excess. And that when they realize this is a big problem for my company, who do I call? Who are they going to call? They're going to call the guy that's been showing them the answer for the last 2 years.
Yeah, and finding problems. There's really a three-pronged approach there. First of all, you have to find out what the problem is and help them find out what their real problems are, and then you have to help them find out what the root cause of those problems are. Like you talked about the data. Here's the cause of those problems, right? Because even though they might know the problem, they have to start understanding what the root cause actually is, how it happened, and then most importantly, that most salespeople just don't know how to do is they don't know how to ask questions to find out what those problems are doing to them, right? Because that brings out their feelings and their emotions. And that's why people purchase something, is because of the emotional part of it, not logic. So it's when you're on social selling, it's talking about the problems, it's talking about the data that goes around that, the root cause of the problem and how it is impacting the industry you're in. And people will start, like you said, to resonate that, and like, that's me. I feel the same way. That happened to us last year. And they start to become like really, really interested in what you're offering. I couldn't agree with you more. Now, I wanted to ask you about this. You, a couple minutes ago, maybe 5-6 minutes ago, you talked about how a lot of companies are really looked at, especially in the tech industry, they're looking at salespeople that really want to brand themselves. Why is it so important in your mind for a salesperson to be like, hey, you're going to really have to learn how to brand yourself now, because in the next few years, if you don't, well, these companies might be replacing you with people who want to. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's already happening. And part of it is a very happy moment for me, because I kind of had a vision of this many, many years ago. And part of me is like, oh crap, like what does this mean for the rest of the salespeople who don't, like the true introverts? And again, like I'm an introvert by nature. I'm very extroverted when I do things like this, but there are real introverts that like, they just want to sit behind the desk and make phone calls all day. They don't want to do any of that stuff.
Right.
And there's got to be a place for them also. But for the companies that are empowering and looking for this, like why they're doing it is because every company realizes that brand matters. Every company realizes that eyeballs matter. And increasingly over time, logos are becoming less effective.
Yeah.
There's
like billions of logos.
And so who do you take your advice from? When you have a problem, when you are trying to find a solution or better yourself or whatever that may be, like, where do you go? You look at your network. Because I am 100, I'm not going to say 99, I'm 100% more likely to take advice from a friend of mine who posts something on LinkedIn about, 10 ways to optimize my SEO or whatever it may be, other than a company, because that company is one of 1,000, and who knows what they're trying to pitch me something. I'll listen to people over companies every time. And I think as we evolve in business and everything else, the individuals in companies, are becoming much more important. And you're seeing individual salespeople step up and say, I'm going to be a voice in my space. And companies that rally around them are now reaping the benefits, because now a wider audience is finding about this company through this one individual who's taking a stand on a specific topic.
Yeah, if a salesperson can generate even 20 or 30% of their own leads, that becomes far more valuable to that company than a salesperson who can't generate any.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah. And then, there's some great stories. I mean, I don't know if your audience knows Jill Rowley. She's an individual that was, one of these early pioneers in the social selling space. Also, she was working at a company named Oracle, and she was generating, I'm making this number up here for the audience. Let's say it was 5X. It was somewhere around there, 3-5X, the number of inbound leads for the company than she was getting herself. And she was like, what do you mean? I'm making millions of dollars for you guys, and I'm still getting my normal, I'm getting paid well as a salesperson, but what about this extra money that's being left on the table? I want a piece of that. And when she said it initially, I don't know if it was half jokingly or not, but I was like, there's a point there. At some point, we're going to see this evolution, and individuals are going to want to get paid on this bigger slice of the pie that they're generating for the business. I don't think we're there yet, but I can see it's going to be there.
Oh, it's coming for sure. I mean, we even have clients that one of the first questions they ask the salesperson when interviewing them for a job, they might be competing with 20 other salespeople for this one account job, is how much did you spend last year in learning new sales training skills apart from what your company spent on you? And if that salesperson says they didn't spend any money on learning sales skills outside of what their previous company did for them, they will never hire them no matter what, because they know that that person doesn't take their career or their profession very serious. And it's the same thing with social selling. You now need to start investing some money in social selling so you learn those skills. Otherwise, in the next few years, you might be left behind.
Oh, it's not even a might. You will be. And we're already starting to see it. And these were predictions that I had 7+ years ago when I was working at LinkedIn. And we're already seeing ripple effects of this. And that's why so many companies are jumping on board with it now.
Yeah. I love that. Hey, man, I can't thank you enough for being on here. Where can our listeners learn more about you and your training on social selling for sure. Like, what can they do to learn more about that?
Yeah. So I'm Koka Sexton on almost every social platform available. So connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always open to connecting with people there. And my website, kokasexton.com, they can probably learn more about the actual stuff that I do.
Okay. Koka, thanks for being on. Social selling is the future, and you are by far an expert in that field. So we're very grateful to have you on here. It's going to help a lot of people listen in for sure.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Jeremy.
Now, if you're serious about joining the top 1%, I mean the top 1%, and you want to experience more training content just like this, click the links right over there. Right over there, they're exactly what you need to see next. You see, I release new episodes featuring top salespeople and sales authorities, multiple six-figure, high six-figure, even seven-figure earners every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday every single week at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you're new here, do yourself a favor and smash that subscribe button right below, and join our new Facebook group, Sales Revolution. You see, it's free, and there's a link in the description below just for you. We put it there for you. Finally, I make posts on Facebook and Instagram each and every day with more tips and training, so be sure and follow me and turn on your notifications. So make a comment in the first 7 minutes to any of my latest posts, share this episode, and there's a very real chance that you're gonna win some killer prizes. And here's the thing, don't sit on the sidelines. Don't be like everyone else. Get into the game. Join the sales revolution, stay active, get involved, learn the right skills, and we will show you how to take your life and income to a level that most only dream about. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.